Pets Add Life, your guide to the latest in pet trends, products, and the joy of the human-animal bond, with Kristen Levine and Chris Bonifati, powered by the American Pet Products Association and DOGTV.
Hey Chris, I think our technology is melting down because of the heat. We're in full-on summer, and we're both having tech problems today.
Yeah, I'm not going to blame the summer. There are actually tiny little gnomes that live inside the computer. A lot of people don't know this. A lot of people think it's like technology and electricity that makes it work. There's actually tiny little gnomes inside your computers that make them work, and they are revolting. They are tired of their working conditions. So please pardon some of the technical issues that may be coming down the road here, but we're going to put a show together for you anyways, despite all those difficulties.
We sure are, and we've got some great guests. We're going to talk about reptiles as pets today because it's World Snake Day, the day this show drops. And we're also going to talk about how to keep our pets up, dogs in particular, how to keep them active and keep their environment enriched, even during the hot summer months, and how to do it safely. So we got some
Sounds
good
awesome.
info from that.
For those of you who are coming back, thanks again for joining us. For those of you who may be new, if this is your first time listening to the show, I'm Chris, that's Kristen, and we are the Pals on the Pal podcast, where we're going to give you two great stories, two product recommendations, talk to two excellent pet experts, and then we're going to answer two of your questions. So without further ado, let's get into our show.
Kristen and Chris present Storytime.
All right, it's story time, Chris. I'm going to let you go first because I think I go first every time.
Okay, why not? So in honor of World Snake Day, we're talking later on a lot about reptiles. I decided to go off the beaten path. I know I talk a lot about dogs and cats because everybody loves dogs and cats. So this is like more of pet adjacent, but it's very much so animal related, and it's local to my neck of the woods here, sort of near the Hudson River Valley. So there is a endangered fishing program called the Hudson River Estuary Program, where they sort of act as protectorates of some of these more endangered species in the Hudson River. And they captured, tagged, and released a 200-pound Atlantic sturgeon in the upper parts of the Hudson River. So these fish are amazing. It took 4 people to sort of hold on to it and take the picture. These fish are amazing. They migrate each year from Florida up to Maine.
Wow.
Now, not all of them make it to Maine, and they come into the rivers essentially for a phase of their life. This is a river monster. This is a river monster. I'm gonna include this in the show notes so that everybody can see the picture. I mean, it is truly impressive. So you have to apply for a National Marine Fisheries Service research permit, which this program obviously does. And they basically do this to help track the migration of these amazing animals. I believe Ron's pulling the picture up now. There it is. That's the one. That's the one from the story. That is the sturgeon in question there. So for those of you who may be listening on your drive to work, this is a fish that is very long and narrow with a pointed face. It's being held by 4 people, 4 grown adults. To be able to carry this thing. An absolutely stupendous animal, and a great job by this research institute to sort of track their migration so that they could better protect these animals.
That is so cool. You know, it's funny. We did not collaborate on our stories of the day, but my story is similar in that I thought I would share the story about the Guinness Book of World Records has just named the it's the tallest dog in the world.
Tallest dog, yes.
Tallest dog, yes.
Very different from largest.
Yeah. And not so surprisingly, it is a Great Dane named Kevin.
Just Kevin?
Just Kevin. He's named after the Macaulay Culkin's character in Home Alone.
That's great.
And get this. Kevin measures 3 foot 2 inches from his feet to his withers, which is basically kind of like his shoulder. So you can imagine if you add his neck and head, that's probably another 18 inches. So, and let's see, when he stands on his hind legs, he's almost 7 foot tall. That is a giant dog. And, it's kind of cool. I was kind of surfing around on the Guinness website and watching some videos, and they were talking about how the dog category is the most popular category of records. And there's a dog on there with the world's longest tail at 30.2 inches long. There's longest tongue. There's all kinds of really great categories. So, if you're sitting around, you got nothing to do, jump on over to the Guinness Book of World Records site and check out this. This isn't quite as good as cat videos, but it's kind of fun to see these dogs breaking some really weird records.
We got an association for everything. We got a record for everything. We've got a world day for everything. 30 inches on a tail's big.
30.2, yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah,
it was an
big.
Irish Wolfhound, which is a huge dog anyway, but still.
Okay.
When you got to.
I was gonna laugh if it was like completely misproportioned, like the tail's just as long as the dog. That would do it for me. That would really get a solid audible chuckle out of me. But who knows? Maybe your beach day has been rained out and you need something to do. So go ahead and peruse that dog category on the Guinness website. Fun thing about the Guinness, I'm going to tell a little anecdote here.
Sure.
The reason Guinness does these world records is because people in the Guinness pubs in Ireland would bicker and argue over who could throw this thing the farthest or who flew this plane the longest or whatever. So Guinness decided to say, in our pubs, we're going to list the records so there's no more of these bar arguments. And it is the same Guinness as the lager. I believe the companies may be separate now, but that is the origin story of Guinness.
I had no
and if
idea,
you don't
but
believe me, don't look it up. Believe everything you hear coming out of my mouth at all times. Just take it at face value.
I'm buying it. It's a good story, so I'll just believe it on its face.
Yep. And it was story time, so.
Beyond the Leash, exploring the untold stories of pet passion and professionalism.
Chris, I've got a confession to make. I have a serious knowledge gap when it comes to reptiles as pets, so I'm really excited about our guest today.
Yeah, absolutely. Welcome to the show. Phil here with the United States Association of Reptile Keepers. As we always say at App over here, we got an association for everything. If it exists, we have an association. So there's one for reptile keepers as well. Phil, you must be a pretty brave guy to keep all these reptiles, especially on a day like today. It's World Snake Day. July 16th is World Snake Day. I don't know about you. I find snakes to be quite cool, but also quite intimidating. So happy World Snake Day. Welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me. And yeah, snakes are just like a lot of things. If you don't understand them, a lot of people have kind of an irrational fear of them. But if you've ever met a snake at an educational program or something like that, usually that fear goes away pretty quickly.
Yeah, that's my only real exposure to snakes outside of, seeing a gardener snake every now and again outside, has been in a very controlled environment, let's say. But let's put ourselves in the shoes of maybe somebody who had one of those experiences and got hooked, right? And they're like, oh man, now I really want to keep a snake. I'd really like to have one as a pet. What are some do's and don'ts? What are like the top 3 sort of beginner pieces of advice for somebody who may be considering keeping a snake?
Yeah, well, just before you get any pet, whether it's dog, cat, bird, whatever it is, obviously do a little bit of research and be prepared because, pets aren't something you buy and then get rid of a week later. They're not disposable. So a lot of snakes can be long lived. They may live 20, 30, 40 years. So you have to be ready for that. But there are tons of snakes. And for some people, this is going to sound big, but a lot of snake species only get 3 to 3.5 feet long. And that sounds big. You're thinking 3 feet, but that's a 3 foot long snake you can hold in one hand. So you have to realize it may be long, but it's as wide as a rope. So obviously if it curls up, you can fit it in your hand or in 2 hands and hold it like that. So again, just know what species you're getting. Obviously, you don't want to get a species that may get 10 feet or longer. If it's your first time pet, especially, you want to get one of the smaller species like a ball python or corn snake or milk snake or something like that. So definitely a little bit of research is number one.
What's it like feeding a snake? Yeah, because I'm so curious because they all I know about snakes is they eat things whole. So is that like an expected part Like, is that something you have to manage? Is like, you have to feel comfortable actually feeding this thing, or are there alternatives when they're a pet?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are a few species of snakes that eat fish or even insects, but generally those types of snakes are not good pets because you have to be more of an advanced keeper to understand how to get that food and how to feed them. And usually those snakes have more husbandry requirements, which husbandry is just the keeping of them. So heat and light and stuff like that. But yeah, for the most common pets, they're going to eat rodents. So they're eating, white mice. But now, since so many people have them, you can buy those frozen. So they're humanely euthanized, and then you unthaw them. So basically, just set them on a paper plate or whatever, let them thaw, and then you feed them to your snake. Usually off a set of tongs, which is just long metal giant tweezers, and that's how you feed the snake. So it's not like you have to throw a live mice in there and go through all that. So a lot different than it was 30 or 40 years ago.
But still quite different from pouring some dog kibble in a bowl.
Yeah, it's still a little bit different than that. So yeah, obviously if you're too queasy to feed your snake a thawed mouse, you're not going to want to get a snake.
Yeah. So Phil, talk to us a little bit about other reptiles that make great pets, and talk a little bit about, like, as you mentioned earlier, the husbandry, the care, because they're quite different than the typical types of pets, dogs and cats, that we usually think about.
So yeah, snakes are not for everybody. Maybe it's because they can't blink or they don't have ears or something, no legs. So they do freak quite a few people out. But there's tons of other reptiles. So reptiles include not only snakes, but lizards, geckos, turtles, tortoises. It doesn't include frogs and salamanders. Those are amphibians. But if it's scaly and can't control its own body heat, then it's a reptile. So lizards, lots of lizards are common pets. Bearded dragons, leopard geckos. Blue-tongued skinks is actually awesome for people who have had dogs, because blue-tongued skinks you can keep on a diet of canned dog and cat food. So there are a few species like that, but blue-tongued skinks I refer to as little sausages with legs. So they're kind of just this long, wide little critter. They can blink, so they're not like snakes, but they just have these tiny little legs. And if you're in the U.S., you may have seen, a lot of people have seen lizards with bright blue tails running around. Mm-hmm. So those are a species of skink, but those are our common skinks here in the U.S. They're native species. What people keep as pets are actually a species from Australia called a blue-tongued skink. So they can actually get 18 inches to 2 feet long,
wow.
But they're kind of built the same. They have fat little bodies and short little legs.
Like the dachshunds of the dog world.
Yeah. You nailed it.
They sound strangely adorable. Is that
they
what
are,
to say?
but,
Yeah.
Because just like dachshunds, they're not the most athletic critters. So if you have even like little rocks for them to climb on, a lot of times it'd take them 2 or 3 minutes to climb up the little rock, and then they'll just kind of fall off the side. But it doesn't hurt them. That's just how they're built, and it doesn't harm them at all. But yeah, they can be pretty comical.
What is an ideal age? And I know this depends on the child, but what's a good age for a child to have a reptile as a pet? And the reason I'm asking is because my nephew, Jet, when he was about 5 or 6, he wanted a bearded dragon, and he got one as a pet, but he was actually afraid of it. Once he got it home, he was afraid to handle it. So can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, obviously that's going to depend on the child. Usually, we suggest at least 5 years or older. The main reason is because it can happen with dogs and cats too, but you can get salmonella from reptiles. So you want to make sure your child is old enough just to understand that the animal should not be going in his or her mouth, and also that they understand how to hand wash well. And if you do those two things, you're not going to get salmonella from your reptiles. So just so they're old enough to know that. But yeah, some 5-year-olds may be afraid of it, but also some 13-year-olds may be afraid of it. So obviously it's going to be individuals. But yeah, 5 is usually a pretty good age to get, a pet bearded dragon. Obviously the parents are going to have to do the majority of the care work, but with a 5-year-old, but certainly that's old enough.
Yeah, I know some 30-year-olds who would be afraid of them. So I think that's pretty fair to say. My question's about the habitat. We hear a lot about, especially in keeping fish, how important the size of the tank is, and the pH level of the water. I feel as though that's pretty similar in the reptile world. So are there any tips on how to identify the right kind of habitat, making sure that that pet is comfortable and where they're going to be spending most of their time?
Absolutely. So that's another reason why it's important to research, because I'll give you a couple examples. A lot of people just think reptile and they think, oh, reptiles like it hot. So with something like a bearded dragon, you have to have a hot spot, which is going to come from an overhead lamp that's 105, 110 degrees, focused on a certain area, because that's a desert species. Now, contrary to that, you have gargoyle geckos, crested geckos, leachianus geckos. If you get over 80 degrees, it's too warm for those species. So you really have to know what you're getting. And then also bearded dragons, desert species, they like it dry. You get those geckos that I mentioned and other geckos, day geckos, they're going to want a tropical environment. So you have to keep it moist. So it totally depends on what you have. And yeah, just like fish, you don't keep goldfish as hot as you keep tropical fish. So same kind of thing. You got to know what you're getting and what kind of habitat it wants.
And where is the best place to obtain a reptile as a pet? Is your local pet store the way to go? Or because I know there's a black market for some of these, for some species. So how can we be sure we're obtaining them from the right sources?
Yes. So you have tons of options, and we'll talk about the legal stuff first. So obviously the majority of the trade is legal. So I mean, any pet store, even the large chain pet stores, have pet reptiles. Obviously, you're going to be limited to what species you can get there. You're looking at leopard geckos, bearded dragons, ball pythons, corn snakes, just a few species. But across the country, you also have reptile shows. I was just at one in California called the LA Pet Fair. Just on Saturday, he had over 18,000 people come to that event.
Wow.
And it was pretty cool. It actually had reptiles, fish, and birds. So a huge audience. But you can go to those. And what you have at reptile shows are people who breed these animals domestically. So they're breeding these animals just like people breed dogs and cats here in the US. So as opposed to 50 years ago, the animals aren't coming from the wild from whatever country. So the blue-tongued skink I mentioned earlier, you can't export animals out of Australia and bring them here and sell them. So those are animals that have been in the US for decades, and people have bred them, and then they sell them at these reptile shows. And the black market stuff you talked about, that's kind of the rare stuff. So there's got to be some kind of illegal activity going on. And those are going to be like super rare species that pet people don't have. A lot of times. Anyway, we won't get into all that, but you're not going to come across.
Thanks for clarifying that.
Yep.
Right. How about vet care? What kind of veterinary care do these pets need?
So it depends on the reptile. Usually they don't need a ton of vet care unless something happens and they get sick. So if you're like, let's say you had a ball python, which likes it not too moist, and say the humidity gets too high in its cage, it may get an upper respiratory infection just like people get. So that's a whole lot different for a reptile because their lungs aren't really as advanced as ours are. So it's a lot harder to get rid of an upper respiratory infection. So you would have to take them to a vet for something like that to get treatment. And there are reptile specialty vets like Dr. Scott Stahl on the East Coast. And a lot of these reptile specialty vets will even do phone consults because you may not have a reptile specialty vet in your area, but there is an association of reptile and amphibian veterinarians, ARAV. You can check them out, and they actually have a search. So you can just go type in your zip code and find that information. But yeah, there's plenty of vets, and it's getting more common because, again, I keep going back a couple decades, but now reptiles are found in almost 5% of U.S. households. So probably about 1 in every 20 people that or 1 in every 20 families actually has a pet reptile. So they're a lot more common than they used to be.
So Phil, before we let you go, time to get a little personal here.
Yep.
Do you have any pet reptiles? What do you keep at home? What's your choice there?
Absolutely, I have pet reptiles, and it was all my parents' fault because I remember when I was little, I caught a baby snake, and they wouldn't let me keep it. So I blamed them. Obviously, if you're a child and your parents tell you no, then you have to do that.
Yep.
So yes, I keep blue-tongued skinks that I mentioned. That's why I know quite a bit about them. I keep leachianus geckos, which is the largest species of gecko in the world. They can get about 18, 20 inches for big ones. Wow. And they're pretty cool because they actually eat powdered diet, kind of like baby food. Yeah. So they're pretty easy to get food for. And this is a part some people aren't going to like, but I keep boa constrictors. which
Oh, wow.
let me talk about that for a little bit. So people
Yeah,
hear
please.
boa constrictor, think this huge snake, and the same thing with python. If all you know of snakes is Hollywood, you think these snakes are out to eat you and they're manhunters and they attack you. That never happens. So snakes don't attack. Snakes don't attack people. That's another thing I like to tell people. If you walk up on a snake, if you're out in the woods and it bites at you, that snake is not attacking you. You're scaring it, and so it's defending itself. It's the same as a person. If someone comes up to you and they're picking on you, you're going to retaliate, once it gets to a certain point. So that's the same thing. The snake's not attacking you. He's just afraid. But in the story I like to tell about boa constrictors is, we'll go back to size real quick. So a 6 or 7 foot long snake, again, it's only going to be maybe as big around as a couple fingers together. It's not going to be all that big around. It's not going to be able to swallow you. that kind of stuff doesn't happen. That's all Hollywood nonsense. But I was shooting a video and I had a snake up high on a 6 foot long cage behind me. This was in a room that was 20 by 30 feet. So I'm just shooting this video. My idea was I was going to turn around and get one of my boa constrictors off of this cage who was just free roaming at that point. And instead of having to do that, he could have gone anywhere in this 600 square foot room, and he crawls off the cage right onto my shoulder. So by no means am I saying that snakes are like dogs, but that snake knew me. He knew it was safe to crawl onto my shoulder, and rather than crawling from me and going somewhere else in the room, he was comfortable just coming onto my shoulder. So by no means am I saying that snakes are dogs, but they certainly do understand a lot more than people realize they do.
Phil, this has been very educational. We so appreciate you sharing your knowledge with us, and it's great to hear that pet reptiles are gaining in popularity. And I like what you said about 1 in every 20 people probably has one at home. So maybe those numbers will continue to increase.
Yep, awesome. Thanks for having me, and happy World Snake Day, everybody.
Happy World Snake Day.
Pets add life.
So I've actually got a funny story about an encounter with a snake. So fun fact, I used to be a camp counselor, which is weird because I always say
totally see that.
But it was like an outdoors camp. Like we took kids camping in the woods and stuff like that. I was WUFA certified, which is Wilderness Outdoors and First Aid. I was a lifeguard. This is back when I was an outdoors kid, and now I'm strictly inside. But we had a sports equipment shed. And each summer before camp started, one of our responsibilities was to go restock the shed, right? What balls deflated, what's still working, what's not. We get there, and living in the shed is a 6.5 foot black rat snake. That is, 6.5 feet. I know that Phil was trying to tell us it's not that big. It's big. That's big, okay? It's big. And there's really no one else who is willing to grab hold of this thing because we're going to attempt to relocate it. So I very bravely, so bravely approach this thing. Yeah. It's a rat snake. It could bite, but it's non-venomous. And its bites, it doesn't chew its food. It swallows whole. So it's not meant to chew. Grab it behind its neck. The thing's wrapping around my arm, and I'm like, bring it to the back of the truck, put it in the back of the truck, drive half a mile into the woods to put it somewhere else. We come back for the first day of camp, and it's back.
No, it's not.
Found its way back. So it stayed with us the whole summer. It was so calm. It never, if a camper came near it, it would sort of just slither away. We named her Big Bertha. And Big Bertha was just part of camp that year. So we attempted to relocate and rehome her a few times, but it never stuck. And she just lived in the sports equipment shed for the entire summer. But it took a lot of bravery. And it was great, too, because it taught some of the campers how to interact with wild animals, got them through that fear of some of the stuff.
I'm really impressed that you were willing to just pick it up, grab it behind the head, and haul it off.
I was a different man back then. I was young and reckless, truly young and reckless.
Hey, do you have that WUFA certification on your LinkedIn profile?
No, not anymore. I would not trust me. If you are hurt and outside, don't call me. It's not work. Just figure something else out. Yeah. So I believe, Kristen, we've got another guest set up. So let's go ahead and jump right into that interview.
Okay. Well, I'm excited about this guest, Chris, because she and I have a lot in common. We're both bloggers and we both love Labrador retrievers. But let me give her a proper introduction. We are happy to welcome Caitlin Brown, the founder of the Sparkles and Sunshine blog, to today's episode. Caitlin is a marketing professional who turned her love for pets and the equestrian community into a thriving online platform. Now, if you visit Sparkles and Sunshine, her blog, you'll notice that it's a haven for dog owners, cat lovers, and horse lovers alike. And she's got tons of great information. And some of the content we want to talk to her about today is surrounding dog enrichment and canine fitness as we are in the summer hot months and how to do that safely. So welcome, Caitlin.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
No, I was on your blog earlier today, and I really was enjoying the content, and I noticed that you've got such great images. You look like you're having so much fun doing it.
It's a lot of fun. My dogs, Diesel and Annie, when Diesel, both of them actually, I started doing stuff with them when they were both puppies. Like I started my blog when Diesel, actually when we first got Diesel, we got Diesel when he was 3 months old. And I wasn't using nothing was the quality that it is now. I was using a camera I kind of had. I didn't really know how to use. My boyfriend, who's my fiance now, was helping me do things. And what's funny is Diesel is such like, he loves to have his picture taken. He loves to be a model. He loves us. So he was like the easy one from day one. And then Annie, every shot that I have of her, sometimes it's like I was able to get it on the first try, and other times, I swear, that dog looks at me and she'll be like, you get one shot. She just doesn't want to take a picture. Yeah, she's like, you either got it or you don't. I'm like, oh God, oh no. But it's a lot of fun. Like, I love that I get to do this with them every single day.
Yeah, so it sounds like you started out sort of just like pretty casually. What inspired you to take this to the next level and become sort of like a beacon in the pet care community?
Yeah, so growing up, I know you mentioned Labradors at the beginning. I grew up doing training with my mom. My mom has done almost everything under the sun. She did obedience trials. She did field trials, like, hunting. She's done so many things with our dogs over the years, and we used to breed when I was younger, and I always had this background and knowledge. And when I started my blog, I actually started on a completely different topic, and the reason why I started it was because that was the job industry I was in, and I was like, oh, I can do this. And then when I realized, okay, no, you really don't like this, what do you love? And I was like, dogs, that's easy. And I switched to that, and it was so much fun because I felt like I was just able to all I got to do was just make more dog friends. I mean, people who have dogs just get it, or people who have animals just get it. And so it was nice to be able to just talk to them and then realize, like, hey, they don't know this, but I grew up with this. Like, not everyone, we all have different backgrounds, and I just felt like, okay, I've actually learned a lot. And a lot of people kept asking me questions, and I was like, oh, this is great. And so I decided to just kind of take the leap and really focus on, the pet side, and I haven't looked back since. It's been great.
That's awesome. Well, one of the things we wanted to dive in with you a little bit more on today is because it's summertime, and we want to make sure that our dogs and cats too are staying physically fit, getting enough exercise, getting enough playtime and enrichment. But in some areas of the country, it's super hot outside. We don't want to be outside during the middle of the day. So can you talk to us a little bit about some of your advice that you share on your blog?
Yeah, and I'm happy that we're talking about this because I live in one of those really hot states. I'm in Florida. And
oh boy.
We've got the heat plus the humidity. I was dying today at the barn when I was seeing the horses. But it's fine. I'm here. It's fine. But yeah, so I do kind of a handful of different things, and I think a lot of it really kind of depends on what your dog likes. Like sometimes it's, trying a few different things. So right now my dogs are actually doing one of my favorites because I knew that I didn't want them woofing during the interview if they saw someone, so I gave them lick mats. And for anyone who's never heard of a lick mat, there's a lot of, brands out there. I have obviously some favorites, but it's essentially a harder material rubber that has different textures, and when the dog licks it, it soothes them, it reduces anxiety, it has a lot of benefits to them, and I put a lot of different recipes. Like I'm actually known like on Pinterest and stuff like that for my lick mat recipes because I'll keep them super simple, or I love to make works of art. I saw on the Licky Mat account once the people were like making like art pieces. I was like, God, I gotta step it up. Mine's just a mashed banana. I was like, what am I doing? I was like, my mom's an artist. She would be like, that's not good. Like, you know? And so I started coming up with these fun designs that still had a lot of health benefits. So lick mats are one of my favorites, especially in the summer or year round here. You know, you stick them in the freezer. Not only is that longer lasting enrichment for the dog, but I mean, it cools them off. I mean, it's like us having a popsicle, which I do make those all the time as well. And then another enrichment idea that I love is doing either store-bought or DIY puzzles. I'm also known for making DIY puzzles. I love to look in my pantry because, I mean, dog parents and just people nowadays, we're all on a budget, right? Life's really expensive. Things are crazy. And so I love looking in my pantry or after I've used something and looking at it, I'm like, can I turn this into something else? And so I've used yogurt tubs, I've used Pringles cans, egg cartons, like all different things to create DIY puzzles, treat dispensers, all those different things. And I love to just make a game out of it sometimes. Instead of giving my dogs their meal in a bowl, I'll switch to that and just use a bunch of them and just let them go at it. And they have so much fun. Like the level, I mean, they're to get excited for dinner. Annie's so food motivated. She eats her flea medicine, if that tells you anything about that dog. But like, yeah, she's something else. She'll eat dirt. It's crazy. But like the level of excitement they get for that is so much more than if I just give them their bowl. And then it's good to not only see that they're excited about it, but know that they're about to have an amazing time. So that's my second. And then the third that you mentioned was canine fitness. And that actually started because of the summer heat. I do agility with Annie. And in the summer months, we take a break because it does get too hot. And last year, I wanted to kind of take a break while keeping her stimulated, so I tried a canine fitness class. It's through AKC. It's AKC Fit, and there's 3 different levels to it, and I've been hooked on it ever since. It's become my new favorite thing because not only is it, canine conditioning, but to me with Annie, it's a confidence builder. Like Annie was a COVID puppy, so she didn't get a lot of interaction that Diesel did. I can take Diesel anywhere. Annie has had to really build up her confidence, and seeing her just like get excited because she knows she's good at it. And it's so cool to see her mind going. She's a cattle dog mix. She's always wanting to work. But she just has so much fun, and it's something that you can always level up. It's just like working out with us. We're building muscles, we're being aware of fatigue. It's all the same things, but it's been phenomenal to the point where I'm getting my CSCC certification through NC State. I love it. I think it's so cool. So those are my top 3, and they all not only provide physical but mental stimulation for dogs.
Those are great tips. I wanted to go back to what you were talking about going through your pantry and just using things that you have at home. I played this game with Tulip yesterday where I save my Amazon boxes, and then I'll just put little kibbles or treats in them and put them upside down and make a little treat maze for her. Yeah. And I think it's important to point out to people, you don't have to go buy a new toy, right? Yes. You can find things, just get creative. Hop on over to her blog if you want some ideas, because she's got some great ideas there. And it doesn't have to cost a penny.
No, and the dogs don't know. That's the best part. A dog has no idea if you spent $30 or the $2 egg carton. They're going to rip it up and have a blast regardless.
Dogs simply don't understand the concept of currency, which is amazing.
No, they don't. Especially when it comes to the vet. They're like, what can I do?
What can I eat to make this as expensive as possible? So talking about, you're in Florida, hot summer months. You obviously are involved with a lot of active dogs. Let's talk safety. There's a lot of dogs out there that are popular. Your lab mixes, your poodle mixes, your huskies and malamutes have these big, heavy coats, and they love to run around, right? They love to get into the backyard and do their zoomies. Do you have any safety tips for folks who may have a heavy coated dog that wants to enjoy the summertime sunshine?
Yeah, so keeping your dog cool is the number one thing. So like, especially down here, we're constantly ensuring that they're getting enough water, staying hydrated. There's a lot of really cool cooling products out there for dogs, whether it's a cooling mat, whether it's a towel. I personally have a vest that I love. And what I like about the one that I have is that you put water in it and it doesn't stay heavy on the dog. It actually evaporates as it cools your dog. So you don't feel like this has like 1,000 pounds on your dog. I feel like also keeping in mind when you're doing things with your dogs, like it's fine for them to go out and play, but like you said, don't go out in the middle of the day. Like when I walk my dogs, and granted, God bless my fiance, he's not a morning person, but I unfortunately am. So I'm up at like 5 every day. I do a workout, and then between 6 and 7, I walk both my dogs, because by 7, I mean, I'm dripping because of what I just did, but I'm dripping just because I'm breathing outside. And so if I don't do things either early in the morning or late in the afternoon or evening, it's too hot for them. And the biggest test that you can always tell if it's too hot, besides just walking outside and going, oh, that's test number one. Test number two is and this is tried and true, if you put your hand on pavement and it's hot to your hand, it's too hot for your dog to walk out there. That's the number one rule. And it's been said for years, but it's not true. If it's too hot and you have to go outside, there's other helpful gear like dog boots, there's amazing brands for that, just trying to see which ones fit the best for your dog. But I would say those are some of my best tips, is just being mindful. And if you're doing anything outside at those times of the day, something that I feel like applies to this too is something that we learn early on in canine fitness, is knowing the signs of fatigue in your dog. So like, especially if you're throwing the ball outside or you're running them around, if say you're doing something outside, if your dog if they're wobbling or shaking, or like the form is lacking in certain things that they normally do, that's a sign to rest your dog. If they are losing interest in what you're doing, they're tired, rest your dog, stuff like that. Just, you almost have to be over aware, I would say, of their behaviors in the summer. Just really keep an eye on them, because, you don't want anything to happen just because you just missed it. Which, not saying it can't happen, but like, just being very attentive is always a good thing to do.
That's true, especially because our dogs want to please us, and they may not, they may want to just keep playing just because we're having so much fun together.
And some of them are just super high drive dogs. Like some of the breeds you even mentioned, like Huskies or Shepherds, or certain dogs like Annie. Even my parents' dog, Aiden, he's a Boxer Shepherd mix, and he's obsessed with the tennis ball to the point where like he'll just keep going. He doesn't want to stop because he's not only having so much fun, but he's just like, this is great. Mom, do it again. Mom, do it again. Like, he loves the time he's spending with you, not even taking it. He doesn't take into consideration that I'm exhausted, and we're looking at him like, you need to come inside. And he's like, nah. I'm like, no.
I'm good. Put me in, coach. I'm good.
Go all day. Yeah.
Cut me, Adrian.
Yeah.
That's a great tip. And you mentioned those dog booties. A little tip from me is try again with those things. The first time you put them on is get the camera out.
Yes.
It's going to be funny. But try again. It's going to take some getting used to. Could you imagine going your whole life not wearing shoes and then somebody making you put shoes on?
Here.
Like you're going to be a little awkward at first. So I would say, like, if at first you don't succeed with that, give it some time, give it a few attempts. But they could be lifesavers for folks like me who hear 5 a.m. and get offended. I'm offended.
So
I'm offended that you wake up that early.
It's okay. So is my fiance, but luckily his job that he has now, he has to get up at a somewhat decent time. It's still after me. He'll never get up as early as me, but when he at least hears my alarm now, at least his isn't too far after that. So I'm like, oh, thank God.
That's great.
Well, thank you so much, Caitlin, for sharing all this great info. And where can people find you? What's the best place for us to check you out?
Yeah, so my blog is sparklesandsunshineblog.com, and I have everything from product reviews, dog enrichment, cat tips for all my cat owners, because fun fact, cats need enrichment too. I've been building that up lately. And then all of my social channels are Sparkles and Sunshine Blog. So you can find me everywhere: YouTube, Instagram, Pinterest, TikTok, while it's here, and everywhere that you can find me.
That's great. So everyone, be sure to check those blogs out. Head over to that YouTube channel. Let Caitlin know that the PAL podcast sent you. Caitlin, thanks again so much for joining us.
Yes, thank you. This was a blast.
Wow, she has a lot of energy. I want to know what it is that she's drinking or eating. And I get up early too, but I don't have that kind of energy.
Yeah, 5 a.m. We're recording this right around lunchtime. She's already put in almost a full day's work, and she was electric. Yeah,
no, she's fantastic.
She's got a lot of and so many great tips about ways to keep your dog busy inside with some of those product recommendations. Some really great stuff in there, and her expertise with some of these more, dogs that kind of have jobs at times, these farming dogs or these retrievers and things like that. A lot of people get those animals and figure out that they bit off more than they can chew. So if you're in that boat, definitely check out Caitlin's blog. She's going to have some great advice for you.
Yeah, we didn't have time to get to the cat enrichment, but she's got some great cat content on there too. So be sure to check out Sparkles and Sunshine.
And the good news is, if you're looking for some cat enrichment, I've got some cat enrichment planned for product of the week. So let's jump right on into our next segment.
The product of the week.
So my product of the week, I teased
That's
it just
scary.
before.
You sound scary.
Yeah, that was a little horrifying. Well, I'll save those for October. This is the Cheerable cat ball. Now, it's a lower price point than other sort of toys in its category. It's like an electric automated toy. It's got a lower price point, and I love it for a couple of reasons. It's like a self-driving ball. So when it activates, it's got some weight in there that's just going to make it move around, but it's touch reactive. So if it hits a wall, it's going to bounce out. If it gets stuck under the couch and it's going to keep on bouncing until it gets out. If your cat smacks it, it's going to react to that and move in a different direction. And what's really cool is after 10 minutes of it not being touched or moved, it's going to turn off. But if your cat decides it wants to play again and touches it, it's touch activated. It'll turn itself back on.
Cool. That's awesome.
So it's a really great product to sort of just leave. And at that lower price point, I think I saw here it's retailing for directly on the website, which will obviously be in your notes, $27.99. So at that price point, maybe you could get a couple of them and leave them around the house in different rooms, fish them out if they do manage to get stuck at the end of the day. But a great product to sort of bring into your home, leave for your cats. They'll figure it out on their own, kind of hones that natural hunting instinct in them to follow something around. Stalk it, pounce on it. It's going to react and go away and let them reset and do it again. I just think it's a really cute idea. It's not over-engineered, so it's not like crazy expensive. There's no app, right? You don't have to download an app. You sort of just get, and I believe it's USB-C charged. So you don't even have to buy batteries. Cool. It lasts, I think they said, total running time 2.5 hours. So it's going to turn off on its own after a bit, save some batteries. But I just think it's one of those great little things. Cats don't get that enrichment attention that dogs do. So just trying to bring some light on some of that stuff. And Caitlin, hey, if you're still listening, feature that product on your blog. That's a free one from Chris.
That's right. I love that one. That's good. My product for this week is a product that I've been using for, I don't know, probably 6 or 7 years. It's called Vetterson Foam Care Shampoo. Okay. And this is, you guys are going to thank me after trying this, because this is the best dog shampoo ever. And what's great about it is it's a spray on, and it's instant foaming. So you know how when you're like, if you're washing the dog, whether it's in the tub or with the garden hose or whatever, you're both getting wet, your hands are slippery, you try to pick up the shampoo bottle and get the cap off. It's always a mess. But this thing, check this out. If you're watching us on YouTube, it's
product demonstration.
It automatically foams, and then you obviously can just lather it into your pet's fur. And the other cool thing about it is it rinses super easy. Like, how sometimes you use too much soap, or shampoo in your hair.
Yeah,
or,
sometimes every time.
This stuff rinses out really easily. So it basically cuts bath time almost in half, but you're not taking any shortcuts on getting your pet clean. Yeah. And I also like it because it's got plant-based ingredients. It's got anti-inflammatory properties. The one that I have here on my desk is the medicated version. And I like this one just because I used to have the Labrador we used to have kind of always had skin issues. And so I had just got in the habit of using the medicated version, but they also make formulas for either very short coated dogs or very thick coated dogs. So you can choose one of the three that best fits your pet. And as I said, the medicated version is great for treating hot spots or any skin ailments that your dog might have. So
that's
check
a great
it out.
Product, Kristen.
Yeah, and we got the link to it in the notes. And I think if you go to the Vetterson website, I noticed they have a 10% off coupon if you want to check that out.
There we go.
So,
yeah, I don't know about folks out there, but I've always found bath time to be part hygiene, part wrestling. So any product out there that takes some of the dog wrestling out of it.
Yeah, I'm thinking you'll use fewer expletives if you during the dog bath if you use the foam care.
Yeah. And I won't have to wear the helmet anymore either, which is really key.
Q&As.
That's right, Kristen. It's time for our favorite segment of the show where we answer some questions from our wonderful listeners. So listeners, pet parents, far and beyond, if you'd like your question answered on the PAL podcast, go on to petsadlife.org/podcast. Scroll on down to the bottom of the page. You could submit your question there, or if you're feeling brave, like Chris picking up a snake brave, you can record a voice memo, send it in, and you will hear your question played on this show. So our first question comes from Jonathan. Thank you, Jonathan. Jonathan's from Austin, Texas, and asks, with the summer heat, I'm worried about my dog overheating. What are the best ways to keep my dog cool and safe during outdoor activities? So I know we've talked a lot about this, but it's an important subject, so we're going to harp on it.
Yes.
And there's products, there's research, there's knowledge that you could arm yourself with. But the one thing that we keep on harping on this show, you've heard a lot of guests bring it up, is learn what your dog looks like when they're exhausted, because the dog isn't going to tell you. The dog wants to please you. The dog doesn't think, their instincts don't work the same way human instincts work, where they're gonna take a break. They could oftentimes work themselves into a bad situation. So my biggest piece of advice is, step one, know what your dog acts like when they're cool and fine and normal and everything's good, and then learn what those changes are going to look like. They're going to be different for every dog. It could be over panting. It could be their tongue starts to hang out when it normally doesn't. It could be a little bit of a wobble or changes in their gait. So learn what those are for your dog specifically.
Yeah, and just to add to that, dilated pupils is also a sign of overheating or heat exhaustion. And there was one more, when you were talking about them, I thought of one more. What was it? You said excessive panting or even foaming at the mouth.
The foam,
So we don't want it to get to that point.
Right.
However, so that's why it's so important to, take the advice that Caitlin shared earlier and that we keep harping on throughout the summertime. And in worst case scenario, if you do find that your pet may have heat exhaustion, the first thing you should do is contact your veterinarian, get a cold cloth and put it on their underbelly, right against their skin, and get them to the vet as soon as possible.
So. Absolutely. And to prevent that, Caitlin brought up a product that I really like. Maybe we'll feature it as a product of the week. We'll find one of the brands, but the cooling vests are really great because they do start off heavy. But Caitlin brought up the point that they evaporate. The water sort of evaporates out and it gets lighter. So you could easily tell when it's run dry and it's time to re-up the cool water. And it's just a great natural way to keep the dog cool. I'd say that's a great square one to start. Your dog might not like that. You might, the booties, your dog might not like the booties. We were kind of joking about how silly they could look at first. But there's all sorts of stuff out there that you can buy. This is a focus of the pet industry in these summer months. They really want to keep the dogs safe. So try out a few different things, see what your dog is willing to tolerate, and what you think is a good match. But there's solutions out there for you.
Okay, Chris, I will read our second question, which comes from Emily in Portland. Hi, Emily. So Emily says, my dog gets very anxious during car rides. What are some effective ways to help him stay calm and comfortable during travel? Okay, so I like this question because I had a dog named Chili who we no longer have him, but he actually got car sick. And when most dogs, when you say, do you want to go for a car ride? They get really excited, right?
Yeah,
well, he would kind of like, he didn't want any part of it. But in the beginning, we didn't know that it was nausea that was actually causing him to be anxious. Now, I'm not saying, Emily, that that's your dog's issue, but I do think that one of the first things you want to rule out is your dog experiencing car sickness, and that's why they're anxious. There's our veterinarian prescribed a great, medication for Chili so that, you give it to him 2 hours before and he was fine because we took some long car trips and he was fine once he was on that medication. But maybe start out with some very short rides and taking him to places he loves, like the park or grandma's house, or just a short ride around the block, and then he gets some positive reinforcement, and see if you can kind of change the meaning of the car ride for your dog. If you find that that he's lying in the back, wherever you have him riding in the car, if you find that he's lying down, panting heavily, drooling heavily, that might be a sign that he's got nausea. So I would talk to your vet about that.
So I was doing some research on this I didn't even know this was going to be a question. I was just looking into it for other reasons.
Just in your spare time.
Well, I get car sick. If I'm not driving, I have to stare out the window. It's the only shot I got. And the reason we get car sick is it's like an inner ear thing with like balance and gravity and all this nonsense. I'm not going to bore you with all that kind of stuff. But dogs experience it the same way. So I read a piece of advice where if your animal is well crate trained, like if they like their crate, they sort of go into it on their own to relax because they consider it their little den. Creating that same space in the car and having it look directly out the window can be very helpful because you're essentially forcing them to stay in one spot and their focus is going to be out the window, which is going to help balance the fluids and crystals in the ear, whatever that is, right? Because I found as myself, look out the window helps me rebalance. So if the animal's anxious as well and they like their crate, if that's a place for comfort of them, it's good to recreate that area in the car. They just might not feel safe or secure. Not to say you're not taking care of the animal, but it is a different environment. And if you can make that environment feel a bit more like their happy place, it could be a good start.
Yeah, excellent point.
Well, Kristen, that is the end of our show. I think we had a really good one today, in my opinion. Despite all these technical difficulties, who cares? Who cares? Our producer will fix that.
That's Ron's problem, not our problem.
That's not a Chris and Kristen problem. It's a big Ron problem. But everybody, please enjoy these summer months. Stay safe. Go swimming. Go for a hike. Enjoy the great outdoors. Do all of these wonderful things. But remember some of these tips that we shared today. They're going to come in handy. And if you encounter a snake, don't be a Chris. Just walk the other way.
Don't be a Chris.
Why risk it? Don't be a Chris. Don't see an unidentified snake, walk up and just pick it up. That's not good advice. That's not good advice. Just walk away. It's World Snake Day. Respect them for that. It's their day. If you see a snake today, give them a bouquet of flowers or maybe some donuts or something to celebrate. But in the meantime, if you're seeing this as a clip, you're on Instagram, you're on TikTok, jump into the comments. Have you encountered a snake recently? Did it scare the pants off of you? Did Chris say something really stupid that you feel like correcting? Hop on in.
How about this?
Tear me to pieces.
How about this? Did Chris's shirt scare the pants off you today? If you're watching us on video.
Loud shirt, loud guy. Yeah, there you go. And you could only see this shirt if you tune into one of the video formats. You got to get onto YouTube. You got to see the clips on Instagram. Everybody's talking about it. Everybody's talking about Chris's shirt today. So if you want to be in the know, you're going to have to catch us on video.
Chris, the recording ended 5 minutes ago.
Oh, no. Oh, well. Well, I'm still going to sign everybody off. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the PAL Podcast. We'll be back next Tuesday for another episode. And until then, stay cool and stay safe.
Bye.
That's how we end every show, Kristen.
Bye.
You always do it.
Pets add life.